We need someone who wants to get exactly such a deep self-term because we still do not get it from teachers. By communicating with them directly, online, of course, in this sense are not so effective. You understand that yourself. You are going to absorb it all now. In general, the topic of our presentation today is the last book by Valery Uvarov, which contains quite a lot of new information compared to the previous version. And I really hope that you will have the desire to purchase it right away. Naturally, read it right away. Well, today Valerie will tell us something very interesting, which is not in a fairy tale to say, nor to write with a pen. In general, welcome.
Indeed, a huge thank you to all of you who came. There are not many of us, but we are wearing vests. Here. And indeed, we have a very important chance to tune in today. And the format in which I am going to give you something new, something unusual, is built on this very important ancient idea, which I sometimes mention, but in the process of cognition, this mechanism plays a crucial role.
Построен именно на этой очень важной древней идее, о которой я иногда упоминаю, но в процессе познания этот механизм играет решающую роль.
This is due to the way information is perceived by a person, on the one hand, and on the other hand, it is connected with the way our civilization has passed, with the stage we are approaching today.
С тем, к какому этапу мы на сегодня подходим.
Everyone who came here today is not random people, absolutely unequivocally. And you are more or less concerned about all the topics that have made you read and learn in general. I have been going through the same paths since 1989. In a sense, I was lucky, considering all the chances that were given and those people with whom my life blossomed. I managed to get acquainted, which allowed me to see the world with slightly different eyes.
Что позволило увидеть мир несколько другими глазами.
And the book that has now been published is probably the first book, and I will not hesitate to say that this is the first book that tells the whole truth about the pyramid.
Не постесняюсь, скажу о том, что это первая книга, которая рассказывает всю правду про пирамиды.
A lot has been written about the pyramids. But still, as experience shows, this is not exactly what would allow humanity to make that most important evolutionary leap, the possibility of which is associated with the pyramids.
Совершить тот важнейший эволюционный скачок, возможность которого связывается с пирамидами.
And in general, my presentation today will be devoted to the history of everything that has happened in the solar system and with us over the past, well, at least 20,000 years.
В Солнечной системе с нами за последние, как минимум 20 тысяч лет.
This is a very unusual story that I collected bit by bit.
Которую я собирал по крупицам.
It is in one way or another taken in ancient texts. But if any person starts their own movement, wanting to find a grain of this truth, I'm afraid that you will not succeed. Moreover, a very powerful confrontation has been going on for 20,000 years. The confrontation of forces that humanity has never encountered before. We're going to talk about this a little bit today, but the idea, I want to emphasize again, of our presentation, is that I would like to return to humanity, that most important knowledge that will help you move forward, see the world with different eyes, understand the meaning of the problem, which will allow you to see something that you have never noticed before.
понять смысл проблемы, что позволит вам увидеть то, чего вы раньше никогда не замечали.
Today, we are going to touch on several topics, because what I would like to tell you is to present in one
То, что я
canvas.
хотел вам рассказать, в одном полотне не изложить.
For this, as an introduction, a whole book is required. Therefore, our conversation will be somewhat slow
В чем-то
today.
медленный.
I want to help you transmit vibration and realize the way of perceiving information in the way it was realized in
Передать
ancient
вибрацию
times.
и реализовать способ восприятия информации таким образом, каким он реализовывался в глубокой древности.
Information is
Информация
perceived by two halves of the brain.
воспринимается двумя половинами головного мозга.
But the
Но
context and the perception of the context depends on which half of the brain the information comes to.
В какую половину головного мозга приходит информация.
A small, very important nuance. But I'm voicing it to the fact that today I want to try to implement this technology on the one
Я хочу
hand.
попробовать реализовать эту технологию. С одной стороны. С
On the
другой
other
стороны,
hand, whether you realize it or not, each of you took part in those distant events that determined the history of our civilization in one way or
каждый из
another.
вас в той или иной мере принимал участие в тех далеких событиях, которые и определили историю нашей цивилизации.
You
У вас
each
у
have your
каждого
own
есть свой
specific experience,
определенный опыт.
and this experience can help you uncover your deep archival data in
Может
yourself.
помочь вам вскрыть в себе ваши глубинные архивные данные. То
In
есть
other
вы
words,
можете
you can activate this
активировать
deep
в себе
memory
эту
in
глубинную
yourself,
память,
but for this you need to
но для
get the
этого
most
вы
reliable
должны
information
получить
about what happened in the
максимально
solar system
достоверную
and, in
информацию о
fact,
том,
what is
что
happening now.
произошло в Солнечной системе и, собственно, что происходит сейчас.
But I
Но я
want
еще
to
раз хочу
emphasize
подчеркнуть,
once again, the war of the gods is at the center of events.
в центре событий война богов.
This is the war that was started by the civilization of Mars and Phaeton, the united civilization of the solar system. I'm giving you an introduction, because if you don't understand this, you won't understand anything further about what's going on. So, very effectively, we asked the phones to be turned off, guys. It's probably my bag.
Моя сумка.
Yes,
Как-
as
как
always.
всегда.
As always. We are going back again, so if you do not realize this, you will not understand why it happens on Earth like this, and, in fact, what periods we are going through with you, and so the war of the gods. Powerful, effective development of the civilization of Mars Phaeton.
Цивилизации Марса Фаэтона.
Your
Ваша
genetics are
генетика
Martian.
марсианская.
Phaeton, or the planet Tiamat, is exactly the type that is shown in the movie Avatar,
В фильме
only
«Аватар»
without tails,
только без хвостов,
pointed ears, cat noses, and so on.
кошачьих носов и так далее.
These
Это
are
люди,
people,
это вот
this is
это
about
они.
them. The average height is 3.5 to 4 meters. The protein that carries oxygen in the blood is hemocyanin. The blood is blue. The skin is blue. And these two civilizations have played a very important role in the fate of the solar system, and in our fate, too.
Судьбе Солнечной системы. Ну и в нашей с вами судьбе тоже.
And
Вот
so
я вам
I'm going to
сегодня
tell you
кое-что
something today,
расскажу.
because in telling you about it, I want to
Рассказывая об
touch on
этом,
some
я хочу
fundamental questions of the universe.
коснуться некоторых фундаментальных вопросов мироздания.
And now, as this knowledge returns, you will have a certain mechanism for implementing this knowledge in practice.
Определенный механизм реализации этого знания на практике.
The problem is for outer space that you have a unique genetics. This genetics at one time allowed you to shoot down a flying ship with an effort of thought. While external civilizations needed to put up technical means to protect themselves from your influence. Understand the level. It is given from God. That's how you have it. Therefore, when the War of the Gods began, I briefly go through this information for you. The civilization of Mars and Phaeton did not know defeats. And they achieved tremendous success in any business that they started. They went by expanding spheres of influence. And everything would be fine if at the head of this whole story, there was not an absolutely amazing man, at first in a physical body, one of the scientific leaders of the Mars civilization. His name is not important now, but we know him by the name of Lucifer. So, studying all the things that we are approaching now, why am I starting this conversation so cautiously? Because then he is at the level of development of the civilization of Mars, which absolutely corresponds to our current one. We are at the same level. He began to investigate artifacts on the planet Mars, which were clearly of alien origin. And we have such artifacts on the planet Earth. We will talk about this separately. We have entire space stations there. And so the study of these artifacts allowed him to draw a number of conclusions that formed the basis of technologies for influencing mass consciousness. The man realized, in this case Lucius, that the world can be as he personally sees it. The expansion of spheres of influence associated with the seizure of certain territories of the galaxy has begun. A galactic war began in our segment, which was developing very successfully for the civilization of Mars. And if it weren't for a combination of circumstances, believe me, the fate of the galaxy, and perhaps even an even larger segment in outer space, would have been influenced by it.
Крупного сегмента в космическом пространстве оказались бы под его влиянием.
The problem is that he decided to go to a reunion with his own kind. And it's not just reconnecting with civilizations that thought in exactly the same way as he did. Everything was trickier. He decided to go for a reunion with himself in parallel realities. A little later, you will begin to understand what this means. Then I'll just point out this moment with my finger, and you will immediately understand what it is about. So, it so happened, to the great happiness of external civilizations, that at that moment, once again, the solar system was passing through a meteor shower. It passes through a meteor shower once every 33 million years. 66 million years ago, all the dinosaurs died. 33 million years ago, the Popogai astrobaleme. The whole north of Siberia was smashed. Everything was floating in lava. The catastrophic consequences of this blow. 33 million years pass, and the solar system enters a meteor shower again. In short, by this point, despite the fact that a system was built to protect the solar system from meteorites and large asteroids, external civilizations managed to join the system, remove protection, and when the solar system entered the meteor shower.
И когда Солнечная
This system did not
вошла в
work.
метеоритный поток, эта система не сработала.
18,714 years ago, a deadly danger in fact hung over the civilizations of Mars and the planet Tiamat.
Смертельная опасность, по сути дела, нависла над цивилизациями Марса и планеты Тиамат.
A new planet was introduced into the solar system between Jupiter and Saturn, about which ancient texts have been preserved, with a clear indication of the dates and places where this happened. Then it is a large cosmic body crossing the solar system in a completely curved orbit.
Солнечную систему по совершенно кривой орбите.
Therefore, the word crossing in the Sumerian text sounds like Nibiru, that is, the crossing planet first approached Tiamat, and made a complete evacuation of each creature from this planet to a new large planet, then Nibiru, while still Nibiru, approached the planet Mars, and even the infrastructure was completely evacuated from the planet Mars.
Пока еще Нибиру подошла к планете Марс, и была осуществлена полная эвакуация даже инфраструктуры с планеты Марс.
Partially abandoned by the infrastructure, because there is nothing left of Tiamat. As soon as this planet, this new crossing has moved away from Tiamat, hits an asteroid, it is broken into pieces.
Планета Тиамат налетает на астероид, она разбита в куски.
The events are referred to precisely as the Great Catastrophe in the solar system, which, by the way, in fact unbalanced the entire solar
Вывела из
system.
равновесия всю Солнечную систему.
The planet Tiamat is dying, the ecosystem of Mars is dying.
Экосистема Марса.
Violatia Mars from its orbit, planet Earth Violatia from its orbit. Chaos is coming, the very chaos that is mentioned in all the biblical narratives. The planet, which at that moment was already named Marduk, is being launched into the third orbit, into our orbit of the Earth behind the Sun. There is fixed and begins a long period of salvation of the solar system, reflected in many ancient texts. These events are very well reflected in the ancient Egyptian cataclysmic zodiac of the Ayunta Naichit temple. And this is where the story begins, to which I am leading you. So, the War of the Gods ends with a complete defeat in the civilization of Mars and Tiamat. Although Mars was called Eden at that time. So, a curious reference is Eden. Therefore, all the gods in the Garden of Eden are really about this. And now look what the Sumerian texts are about, in particular Enuma Elish. Curators come here, those who have won. They come to planet Earth and see a civilization that is a complete projection of the civilization of Mars and Phaidon, especially Mars. You are Martians, in fact, your genetics are Martian. And if nothing is done with you in any way, leave it as it is, you are very likely to form the same civilization as the Martian one, with all the ensuing consequences and negatives. Therefore, a decision is made. This is a very important detail. To gather something like a galactic assembly, which is mentioned in these texts, in order to make a final decision on how to deal with the planet Earth. The group is divided 50 by 50. Some believe that the planet Earth should be sterilized, others believe that it is necessary to leave everything as it is, because the cosmic law says that in order to solve the issue, the leader at that time, a half-breed, is invited from Earth. His historical name is considered to be Gilgamesh of this person, but Gilgamesh is not a name, it is also a synonym. That means a descendant of the hero.
Гильгамеш это не имя, это тоже синоним, который означает потомок героя.
Therefore, Gilgamesh, the ruler of Uruk, is the person who was related by blood to the one about whom I will say a few words now. The one who was invited then, apparently, his name may be Noah, may be Atrahasis, but something like this is a biblical name. And the question was tough.
Стоял жестко.
It was necessary to decide what would be done with the land and with the population of the earth, complete sterilization, or leave everything as it is. The question was asked to Gilgamesh. I am now trying to restore to the extent possible the sequence of conversation from ancient texts. But the point is that he managed to convince them not to sterilize all the earth at once and to give the earthlings a chance.
Стерилизовать полностью землю сразу, а дать землянам шанс.
And this is the moment that starts the whole story of our civilization.
Момент, с которого начинается вся история нашей цивилизации.
The story is not easy, and I would like to tell you about it.
Рассказать.
A very unusual story. It is connected with the fact that the first thing that happened, as you have already understood, was the neutralization of the two largest planets, one of which, in our understanding, was a military-industrial complex. This is the planet Tiamat. Therefore, it was not just destroyed, it was smashed to shreds. The next one was the planet Mars. The same thing happened, in fact, on Earth. When Gilgamesh was asked to return to Earth and negotiate with the Earthlings so that they would change their way of thinking, as it were. In other words, it was about the fact that for a long period of communication with the civilization of Mars and Phaeton, which were, pay attention, an intermediate link between the civilization of Earth and outer space. Civilization, I repeat, is at an extremely high level of its development. Therefore, they are perceived as gods, and it was quite a deservedly. What a powerful impact I feel. That's something I'll tell you. Well, then we are on the right track. Gilgamesh is back. He met with the leaders of all tribal formations in the territories where the civilization of Mars and Phaeton call their ancient text Anunnaki. Here, too, I will casually mention who they are, so that we correctly understand what role they played in the history of our civilization. So, the genetic Martians are similar to us, so when they came to Earth, they, in fact, chose a base for themselves. And now, perhaps, I will begin to show you the image and tell you about what I wanted to tell you, simultaneously introducing new concepts that have not been in the world esotericism for today, until a certain period.
До сегодняшнего дня, до некоторого периода, в мировой эзотерике не было.
It's time to withdraw them so that we have a tool for using it for practical purposes.
Для использования его в практических целях.
So, when Mars and the planet Tiamat fell on Earth, on the mainland, which was called Mu.
Когда пал Марс и планета Тиамат, на Земле, на материке, который назывался Му.
He was in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There was a large base of those who came from Mars. The first generation were Martians who entered with earthly women, as the biblical narrative says. Half-breed children appeared from them in sexual relations. These children are the Anunnaki. Not the Martians, but these children.
а эти дети.
They are called the descendants of Anna. But here I want to make one very important understanding right away. When these children appeared, and their mothers were earthly, that of the first generation, that of the second generation.
У них земные, что первого поколения, что второго поколения.
Because
Просто
after the
после
fall of
падения
Mars,
Марса,
Phaeton
Фаэтона,
Anunnaki lived on the continent of Mu 2,500
жили
years.
на материке Му 2500 лет.
After the conversation, let's call him Noah or Atrahasis, when a warning was given to earthlings, that you need to rebuild your philosophy in a certain way.
Землянам, что вам необходимо определенным образом перестроить свою философию.
That is, you need to give up the knowledge from the gods. I quote an ancient text, although you know they were not gods, but nevertheless. It is important to convince the people of Earth to accept the point of view of curators, Orion.
Важно убедить землян принять точку зрения кураторов, орионцев.
And this task, it was not completed.
Эта задача, она не была выполнена.
The earthlings didn't go. But you and I, you understand, even now, if they say to us, let's give up our communist beliefs, let's give up orthodoxy, and let's go the way of Western countries. You understand, you're not going. We will give our lives, we will not go. The same thing happened then. They didn't go. And then, looking ahead, I will say that 3 asteroids struck the Earth alternately, with periods of several thousand years.
Периодами в несколько тысяч лет по Земле было нанесено 3 удара астероидами.
The first blow was struck 16,200 years ago, to be exact. 16,174 years ago, a large asteroid falls into the Pacific Ocean. And the mainland, according to ancient texts, with a population of 64 million people dies immediately, within one night.
Если верить древним текстам, с населением в 64 миллиона человек гибнет сразу, в течение одной ночи.
The blow was struck at the very center of the Earth's civilization, where the Anunnaki were located. And the issue was closed with them right away. Although, of course, we will return to this today a little later. Not everyone seems to have died, not everyone, but we are now talking about the sequence of events. So, after the first warning through Atrahasis, Noah, it doesn't matter. Humanity was given 2,500 years. It failed an asteroid hit. Then humanity is given another 2,500 years to see how people will change morally and ethically.
На то, чтобы посмотреть, как люди будут меняться нравственно и этически.
Changes do not occur 13,675 years ago. The so-called Azores asteroid falls to Earth. In the area of the Azores shallow water, with all the consequences that follow from this. It was a planetoid. The impact caused the angle of inclination of the Earth's precession axis to change. The Earth was knocked out of its orbit. Before the year was 360 days, now it is 365. By that time, a complex for reflecting meteorites and asteroids, built with the participation of the Anunnaki, was already actively working on Earth. And that's when the planetoid, the child of the pit, as the ancient text says, appeared over the planet Earth. The first strike was carried out over Alaska at a sufficiently high altitude. The purpose of the strike is an attempt to change the flight path of this asteroid. It was unsuccessful. That is, the installation power was not enough. Then the next strike occurs over the territory of northern Siberia. And here is the place where it was made a desperate attempt at deflection.
где была предпринята отчаянная попытка по отклонению.
Literally
В данном
hundreds of
смысле
terminators.
сотни терминаторов.
What is
Что
it?
это такое?
This is
Это
a metal ball up to
металлический шар,
60 meters in diameter, hollow, pumped by a
диаметр до
powerful
60
electromagnetic field.
полый, накачивается мощным электромагнитным полем.
All phases of the activity of this installation are described in my materials, and there are even videos of all the activities of this installation. But nowadays, how it works. So, when a giant asteroid went over Tamir, and at this point, they tried to split it again, rejected. This powerful explosion led to the burning out of a huge amount of oxygen in this place. Here is the answer to the question about the mass death of animals. Because everything was flying up, everything was torn to pieces. Cold air fell from above with a temperature of -70, -100 degrees, which led to a complete freeze of everything around. Then he proceeded to the Kozer shallow water, and there he sticks into the acupuncture point of the earth. There is a permeable substrate. So, well, in short, this is a tidal wave, this is a tsunami, as a result of which the Hyperborean civilization is dying. The Atlantean civilization is dying, a powerful blow turns out to be on it, and everything around it. So, 13,675 years ago. During all this time, there has been an active restructuring of the solar system, which was brought into chaos naturally, after the passage of the solar system through a meteor shower. What was done that was so significant? So, we started a new planet, placed it in the orbit of the Earth, behind the Sun. We are the opposite. The size of the planet Marduk, judging by ancient texts, is larger than the size of the Earth by the mass of the Moon. So the Moon was artificially dragged to the Earth, the mass of the Earth was increased by the mass of the Moon. And fixed, I emphasize once again, there are texts and exact dates when this happened. And third, again, it takes almost more than 10, almost 12,000 years of our civilization for us to figure out our morality and ethics. And again, unsuccessfully. Therefore, in the year 1259th year BC, less than 800 years ago, on the floor, again, not randomly drops a large asteroid directly into the mouth of the volcano of Santorini. All cases of the fall of these three variants are not all random, all are clearly induced. The explosion of the Santorini volcano leads to the fact that, first of all, the Mediterranean Sea appears on the face of the Earth. It did not exist before. Only 800 years ago, there was nothing. And when the Earth was shaken by this explosion, that's the answer for you in the village. Why everything was filled up everywhere up to the 4th floor, everything is in the ground and so on. The destruction is colossal. This is the explosion of the Santorini volcano. There was no Black Sea, there was a lake, the Black Sea appeared. The Egyptian executions are the fall of the Azores, or rather the Santorini asteroid. I said, I'm sorry. It was the third blow. In this regard, I would like to emphasize one more very important detail, which should show you the seriousness of what happened and is happening now. The ancient text preserved a mention that when a very, very long time ago, the one we call Gilgamesh, but in fact it is Atrahasis, Elena and so on, was invited to a meeting and a decision on the issue of deciding the fate of the planet Earth. The following event was received as an invitation. So this man was moving in the desert, in a deserted place.
по пустынному месту.
At this time, a pyramid-shaped UFO object appears in the form of a pyramid. It is invited with all the consequences. You know the whole story further in general form. Now I want to remind you that in the autumn of 2009 year, a pyramidal object hovered over the Kremlin. Do you remember this story? Here is the same object. I emphasize, this is the one with the same license plate, roughly speaking. This means that the Earth has been allotted a maximum of 150 years to solve moral and ethical issues. After that, we are waiting for very unpleasant events, the fall of another, not accidental, with all the ensuing consequences of an asteroid. So, in fact, that's the reason why I personally decided to tackle all these issues 33 years ago.
Лично я решил заняться 33 года назад решением всех этих вопросов.
And moving away from all this esotericism, from all this spiritual chatter, look at everything that happened in truth.
Посмотреть на все, что произошло по правде.
Let's face it, what happened.
А что случилось?
And what happened is what I told
Я
you.
вам сказал,
But at least the civilization of Earth
она,
exists.
по крайней мере, существует.
It is
Но важно
important
в
to
этой связи
emphasize the following in this regard. That at
что
the
в тот
moment
момент,
when these events
когда
took place, the Earth lost this middle link between us and outer space.
Вот это среднее связующее звено между нами и внешним космосом.
This contact, this life-giving contact, which gave us knowledge, which is quite natural, because from the point of view of development. After all, we come to school with you, we go to the teacher, we study. We don't think it's abnormal.
Считаем, что это ненормально.
This is normal.
Нормально.
And when teachers are good, then students turn out to be good.
Ученики получаются хорошие.
And here we have completely lost this connection.
Полностью.
And here's civilization, a very small group of priests. By and large, there was someone descendants of the Anunnaki, those who did not.
Кто-то потомками анунаков, кто-то нет.
They began to carry knowledge.
Знания.
From those very distant times to the present day, in order to help you and civilization
Для того,
survive.
чтобы помочь вам и цивилизации выжить.
So, in short, a jump from where we started.
Скачок с того, с чего мы начали.
And what was the
В чем была
problem?
проблема?
Why is there such a cruel attitude towards the civilization of the earth? The energies of Lucius, Lucifer.
Люцифера.
Because at that moment, when he began to conquer the galaxy, and he lacked opportunities, because the physical body has certain limitations, then you can't cover everything.
Определенные. Вы не можете охватить все.
He translates himself into energy. He becomes an energetic entity, a fallen angel,
Падшим ангелом.
and from that moment on, he gets the opportunity to control the consciousness of every person in whom he is interested. Under his control were all those military personnel who carried out missions one way or another. Do you remember a few years ago, there was once again such a wave of interest in Sumerian images? The Sumerians wore watches. Remember it on the left hand like this. It's not a watch. This is a special bracelet that was placed on the left hand on the pulse zone, through which the human consciousness was controlled. That is, everything that the person thought about was known to Lucci. He rebuilt the consciousness of your people on earth so much that black became white and white became black. The only thing I'm going ahead, the only one who began to resist him very powerfully is a special female order, which today is called the Bene Gesserit. That's how we know him. And this struggle is still going on, but we will not talk about it now. This is a very important topic. We're just getting to the point where we have to start realizing what's going on. When the curators came here, and when they offered Atrahasis, Gilgamesh, it doesn't matter. This person to negotiate with earthlings on certain topics.
договориться с землянами по определенным темам
It was about
речь
getting rid of the energy of Lucius.
об освобождении от энергии Люция.
Those Anunnaki who were on Earth, who had family ties, here are children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
Внуки, правнуки.
You understand,
Понимаете,
right?
да?
They are
Они
Anunnaki.
ануннаки.
For
Для
them,
них
Earthlings and these
земляне
people were not an
не
empty
были
word.
пустым словом.
Those who
Те,
were
кто
a
был
direct
прямой
Martian,
марсианин,
and they were under the direct influence
и
of
они были
Lucifer,
под
they
прямым
could not do
воздействием
anything with
Люцифера,
themselves.
они
So they went
ничего
under
не могли
direct
поделать с
degradation,
собой,
for which the so-called
поэтому
psychotronic canon
они
was
пошли
used.
под прямую деградацию, для чего использовалась так называемая психотронная пушка.
It doesn't matter, we're not
Неважно,
talking
сейчас мы
about
не говорим о
technology right
технологии.
now.
Это
This is a
прямая
direct
деградация,
degradation
сразу
to
в
zero
ноль.
at once. Otherwise, it
Иначе
will
не
not be
очистить.
cleared.
А
But
вот
for
для
those
тех,
who
кто
stayed here,
остался
it
здесь,
was this, it's amazing, provoked, because the
была
technology was transferred
вот
by
эта
the
вот,
women's order.
это удивительно, спровоцировано ведь женским орденом, передана технология.
We
Мы
find elements of this technology in ancient
элементы этой
Egyptian
технологии
texts.
находим в древнеегипетских текстах.
And
И в
in one
одном
of
из
my
своих видео
videos,
я
I mentioned the
упоминаю о так
so-called
называемой
triad,
триаде,
the great triad
великой
of
триаде
wind
выхода в
exits,
свет Ра.
about which the ancient text,
О чем
ancient
древний текст,
Egyptian,
древнеегипетский,
it is
это
called
Рау
Roru.
Депертенхру.
This is a certain
Это
extraction of
определенное
exit
изучение
technologies
технологий
from the
выхода в
wind.
свет Ра.
What's the
Смысл в
point?
чем?
Liberation
Освобождение
from the
от
energy of
воздействия.
Lucius.
Вот
That's the
проблема
problem and the task that was
и
set
задача,
by
которая
outer
была
space.
поставлена внешним
You get
миром.
rid of the energy of Lucia.
Освобождайтесь от энергии
No
Люция, нет
problem.
проблем.
We live on
Каким
and our
образом? Не
friends.
освобождайтесь.
You are not released. And for this, Igor's
И для этого были
caduceus was
даны
given,
Люций
the
Гора,
meaning of which is
смысл
to
которого
stimulate the
стимуляция
human energy
энергетического
system
человека и
and
открытие
open
вот
this shoe
этого
channel.
канала Шу.
I'm
Так,
casual.
вскользь.
Then,
Затем,
to get rid of the
для
energy of
освобождения от
Lucius,
энергии
it
Люция
is necessary
необходимо
to use
использовать
a unique
уникальную
technology
технологию,
embodied
воплощенную
in
в
the
так
so-called
называемом
ant.
Анхе.
Ant is a
Анх — это
special kind of
особого рода
system.
система.
If you
Если
put
ты
this
ставишь
block
этот
on the
блок
foundation in the
на
form of an
фундамент в
ant
форме
in
анха,
round
в
parts,
круглой
the
части
withdrawal of
начинается
negative
вывод из
energies of
энергетического
any
человека
plan
негативных
from the
энергий
energy of the human
духовного.
system begins. Then,
Затем,
when the energies
когда
are withdrawn,
энергии
a
выведены,
person can enter the pyramid and then
человек может
connect
войти
with
в пирамиду
himself, with the Supreme Being through
и
the pyramid.
тогда соединиться со самим собой, с высшей сущностью через пирамиду.
It was an
Это была
attempt to
попытка
help humanity
помочь
restore the lost
человечеству
middle link.
восстановить утраченное среднее звено.
There is no other
Другого варианта
option
нет, потому что
because the
человек
person has
потерял
lost it
это.
all. Why is an
Почему
important?
важен анх?
Why is this
Почему
pyramid
важна
important?
вот эта пирамида?
I was
Я в
doing
свое время,
Kedushin or
занимаясь
rods. Jaeger has
кадетированием
come a
даже
long
города,
way, that
прошел
is,
длительный путь,
achieved very
что
good
называется,
results.
добился
But I
очень
saw that
хороших
this was not
результатов,
enough.
но я видел, что этого не хватает.
Then we
Затем
built real
построили
pyramids,
пирамиды,
honest ones,
настоящие,
with all the
честные,
cases, that is,
со всеми
according to
делами,
science.
по науке.
Believe me,
Поверьте,
he
строил
built better
лучше,
than the
чем
Egyptians.
египтяне.
No
Нет
result.
результата.
Why?
Почему?
It turned out not by chance that in all ancient Egyptian texts, and not only, and Mayan and many places, the gods hold these ankhs in their hands. And, what's the point? Look, in the human body, here we take food with you, we have everything in this food there, including undesirable substances, carcinogens, and so on, so on.
Канцерогены и прочее, прочее.
We have a so-called blood-brain barrier in our body, which cuts off, neutralizes all the negative, so that it does not get into the brain, and the brain does not lose its working capacity. So, in this channel between the earth, between your energy system and the cosmos, by you, only on another level, there is this very encephalic barrier,
И есть вот этот самый энцефалический барьер
and it is closed as long as you are in the energies of Lucius.
в энергиях Люция.
If you have them, you will not miss the external immune system. This immune system was embodied in ancient Egyptian texts, including the snake priest. A lot of things. I cite all these translations in my books. Very interesting information. The topic seems to be tightly closed. But, as they say, now let's move on.
Теперь пойдем дальше.
There, who controls the time, you control so that we fit in at an hour and a half. If not, then we will continue further.
Поэтому
So now
теперь
I
я
would
бы
like to
хотел
talk about the
рассказать
ancient Mayan priests and about the priesthood in general, but today about the Mayan priests.
жрецах. И и вообще о жречестве, но сегодня о жрецах майя.
Because, in fact, very little has been said about them, very little.
Сказано. Очень мало.
Some of you have watched the Apocalypse movie, and you remember what happened there.
И вы помните, что там происходило.
And naturally, in the course of the story, this question will arise from any reasonable person capable of analytics. But the situation turned out to be as follows. It's like in Egypt. When you study the history of ancient Egypt at school, you come across, for example, a list of Egyptian kings pharaoh. And a certain sequence is given, from Normer and so on, up to the last pharaoh. But in fact, this is absolutely incorrect data because, as in ancient Sumer, in this country, and not only in it, where every city was a state, and every state had its own pharaoh in the city, we are beginning to understand that this situation is somewhat different. And in general, everything in history is really sorted out. Do you understand? A small example, this stuffing just to make it clear what we're dealing with. And this, I emphasize, is not accidental. I told you that the Santorini volcano exploded in 1259th year. But you see, one very important event is connected with the explosion of the Santorini volcano, which determines the identity of the entire Jewish people. This is the exit of the Jews from Egypt. But it happened. And anyone who graduated, of course, from a state university in any country 3,500 years ago will tell you. But a purely scientific experiment was conducted. Scientific. They just took it away. You see, every volcano has an ash cloud when it is ejected. And this ash, it's like a fingerprint, unique, there is no other like it. And when you ejected it, the cloud is 2, 3, 4 times, depending on the heights around the Earth flying. It crumbles everywhere, and it can be picked up and viewed. So, when the cores were made in Greenland at the South Pole, and there was this ash, it turned out that the event occurred in 1259th year of our era. It counts very well. This means that the Jews came out of ancient Egypt 800 years ago. So the Pharaoh spent them on the tone 8 years ago, and not 3,500. You understand, right? In other words, we are not going to go back to this now. It is clear that this is a complete whore. It's just that there is no more prodigal. Well, let's get to the main thing. I'm just paying tribute to this top-secret women's order, no matter what it's called, and to a group of people who started bringing this great knowledge. This was a fundamental task, because the destruction of this knowledge was in the direct interests of Lucifer, and, to a certain extent, the curators.
Находились в зоне прямых интересов Люцифера и до определенной степени кураторов.
Because this knowledge gives you tremendous power. And if you understand everything correctly and do everything correctly. And so, as I sometimes say, it turned out historically that the Anunnaki are completely deceived. They tell all sorts of nonsense about them, and not a word of truth, and about the Mayan priests. There really were cities where the events shown in the movie Apocalypse took place. Whereas the group of priests interested in general, they had their own interests, not cosmic ones. They built pyramids, they didn't work for them. And in order to make the pyramid work, they followed a simple path. They began to arrange mass sacrifices in order to turn on the pyramid, well, somehow turn it on. But nevertheless, there were those among them who carried and developed this knowledge. So, look. The civilization of the Earth was once in close interaction with the civilization of Mars and Phaeton, which in turn were at a very high level of development.
Которые, в свою очередь, были на очень высоком уровне развития.
And people have received a colossal amount of knowledge, which was in the process of the events that we casually talked about today, disintegrated, torn to pieces, and therefore we have some Egyptian pyramids, Mayan pyramids, Chinese pyramids there, Sumerian ones. Everything was torn to pieces. And our task with you now is to try to return this knowledge. As I told you, this knowledge, since we are talking about the Mayan priests, here is a map for you where they settled. So on the left is the mainland of Mu, and on the right is Atlantis. But that's not all. There is a very interesting nuance here. Here is the approximate location of the mainland. It was a very large continent. In ancient times, it was a chronocorridor, that is, it is a zone of transition from one dimension to another. That is why, not only because there was an ideal climate, they settled there, because there was a channel of direct interaction. Roughly speaking, in order to get to Mars from this place, it was not necessary to smoke a ship, you know. There are some infrastructures. No. The corresponding technology opens, well, roughly speaking, the Stargate, you make the transition, and you're there. And so, roughly speaking, he opened the door there, went in, went out, went in, went out. Australia, also a throne corridor. Accordingly, they were here in direct interaction with outer space. The people, the local population who lived here, were in direct interaction with those who passed on to them. Very, very serious knowledge of cosmic origin. By the way, I want to say that there are pyramid complexes preserved on some islands here, which are historically so scientifically unknown yet, but they are there. And maybe we'll fly there somehow, as they say, on an expedition, and then we'll show you these pyramids. They have been preserved there from this civilization. Now, on the other hand, this is where the Maya lived, you see, the throne corridor. In other words, the development of the Maya civilization was also not random, and this place is a transition zone, where connecting to outer space does not require serious energy costs, and you do not need to get out of your skin in order to contact someone, ask a question, and get an answer. Side by side, the Bermuda Triangle is the most powerful chronocorridor operating to this day.
Бермудский треугольник – самый мощный хронокоридор, действующий по сей день.
This Kryn corridor has already been closed, and the Atlantean civilization was located here. It's exactly in this place. It was an island archipelago, on which the main pyramid was located, the center of space communications. And this pyramid, it worked in conjunction with the Meru Pyramid in Greenland. They are on the same straight line and face-to-face in advertising interacted. Africa, the north of Africa, the chronocorridor that operated, and in this place, too. The chronocorridor is the one through which the Dogons received their knowledge. Let's move on. Well, the fact that the two catastrophes that destroyed these two civilizations, in fact, I have already told you. Now we are going to briefly talk about the basic principles of the universe.
Тему основных принципов мироздания.
We know
Нам
that there are
известно,
7
что
basic
этих
principles
принципов
of the
мироздания
universe.
основных 7.
I think
Я
that
думаю, что
each of you
каждый из вас
automatically
автоматически
guesses
догадывается,
that
что
since
раз
there
их
are 7 of them,
то они
they are
определенным
connected
образом
in a certain way
связаны
either structurally
либо
or
структурно,
in some other way with the 7 energy
либо
shells of a
как-то еще
person.
с 7 энергетическими оболочками человека.
And in
И
this
вот в этой
regard,
связи
it is
очень
very
интересно, что
interesting that the first principle that has
первый
come down
принцип,
to us from an ancient text,
который
from Hermetics, is the
дошел до
principle,
нас из
remember,
древнего
of
текста
mentalism.
генетики, это принцип, помните, ментализма.
That is,
То есть
everything
все
is a thought.
есть мысль.
So,
Вот,
look,
смотрите.
the South
У
American Indians of the
южноамериканских
Disana tribe have
индейцев
preserved the
племени
knowledge
Дисана
that the
сохранилось
cosmos
знание
has the shape
о
of a
том,
brain.
что космос имеет форму мозга.
It has a
Он имеет
two-chamber
двухкамерное
structure,
строение,
and there is a permanent
и
communication
между
channel
мозгом
between the
человека
human
есть
brain.
постоянно действующий канал связи.
This is such a
Такая
small,
маленькая,
very
очень
important
важная
detail,
деталь, из которой
from
мы
which we
видим,
see that this is not just
что
a certain
это не
principle,
просто
well,
некий
it's just something with a certain understanding
принцип,
that
ну,
pushes us the
это
idea that the
нечто
brain is a
при
resonator.
определенном понимании, что наталкивает на мысль о том, что мозг — это резонатор.
And if we look at how the human body and our brain work from the point of view of the principle of anthropomorphism, we begin to get ideas, understand what we lack in order for this channel to work effectively.
А что нам не хватает для того, чтобы вот этот канал, он работал эффективно?
And why
А
is it that
почему
each of you,
каждый из вас,
when
когда
meditating,
медитирует,
we want
вы
to
же
get
хотите
some kind of
получить какой-то
contact,
контактировать,
but we
а у нас не
can't?
получается.
Why?
Почему?
Encephalic barrier, the energy of Lucius.
Энергия Люция.
That's why they don't
Поэтому
let
не
you in
пускают
there.
туда.
The next principle, of
принцип,
course,
естественно,
which we should always
который нам надо
remember,
всегда помнить,
is the
это
principle
принцип
of correspondence, or the
соответствия или
principle of
принцип
analogy.
аналогии.
What
То,
is
что
above
наверху,
is
подобно
similar to
тому,
what
что
is below.
внизу.
And now
Сейчас
we
мы
are
с вами
going to
затронем
touch on a topic related to the pyramids. And in order for us to understand what knowledge was embodied in the pyramids,
И
how was
для
it
того, чтобы мы
implemented?
с вами понимали, какие знания воплощались в пирамиды, как это реализовывалось. Вот.
I started
Начал
introducing the
вводить
concept of
понятие
anatomy and philosophy
анатомия
of
и
pyramids.
философия пирамид.
Because
Потому
if
что
you
если вы не
don't
понимаете,
understand what
какая
philosophy is
философия
crammed into the
пирамиды,
pyramid and what its anatomy is, you will never be able to build the right
вы
pyramid.
никогда не сможете построить правильную пирамиду.
For example,
Например,
well,
грубо
roughly
говоря,
speaking,
пирамида
the
Хеопса.
pyramid of Cheops. Its height
Ее
has a
высота имеет
non-random
случайное
value.
значение.
It is related to
связана
the frequency of
с
oscillations of the cerebral
колебаний
cortex.
коры головного мозга.
Everyone
У
has a
любого
carrier
человека
frequency.
есть несущая частота.
It is the
Она
same
для
for every
любого
humanoid in the
мира
universe,
Вселенной
hertz to
одна и та
hertz.
же. Герц в герц.
Accordingly,
Соответственно,
if you introduce this
если вы
concept in a
определенным
certain way
образом
into the height of the
вводите это
pyramid,
понятие в высоту
this
пирамиды,
pyramid
эта пирамида
becomes the
становится
center of cosmic
центром
communication,
космической связи.
which is the
Что
medium
является
carrying the signal
средой,
far into space.
выносящей сигнал далеко в космос.
This is the
Это
vibration of the
вибрация
planet Earth,
планеты
especially
Земля,
in the low
особенно
frequency
в
range.
низкочастотном диапазоне.
Planet
У
Earth
планеты
has its
Земля
own REN.
есть собственный REN.
This is a
Это
low frequency oscillation
низкочастотном
with a period
диапазоне
of one pulse in 54
колебания
minutes.
с периодом один импульс в 54 минуты.
This pulse was
импульс
recorded by
был
the Japanese
зафиксирован
Showa station.
Японской станции Сёва.
Physically,
Физически,
instrumentally,
приборно,
while
в
the
то время
ancients
как
knew
древние
about
о
it.
нем знали.
So,
Итак,
54 vibrations or yin,
колебания
54
ба
vibrations,
или и,
K or yang
54
54
колебания
plus 54
К или
108.
54 плюс 54 — 108.
Here are
Вот
all
вам
the
все
sacred numbers for
священные
you,
цифры,
where they come
откуда они
from.
берутся.
See how it
Смотрите,
was
как это
done.
делалось.
There's such a curious moment.
Любопытный момент.
The Pyramid of
Пирамида
Cheops.
Хеопса.
The dispute
Спор
is still
до
going
сих
on
пор
about that.
идет по поводу того,
And they
и
often send
мне
me
часто
links to the
присылают
film, For example, look at the next secrets revealed about the Pyramid of Cheops.
Какие-то там тайны открываются про пирамиду Хеопса.
And here's what. The height of the Pyramid of Cheops, and the width of the base, the number pi, and in general all these things. At the same time, the width of the base is 230 meters. The height is whatever. The Pyramid of Cheops cannot have a large set of values. There can only be one, you know. And it is formed only in one case if you understand that it embodied. So, if this purity is embodied in the height of the Pyramid of Cheops, which ties you to all the humanoids of the universe, well, at least the galaxy, then now this frequency needs to be taken beyond the aura of the solar system, beyond the aura of the Earth. To do this, look 54, we build a right triangle, a square. The square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the legs, right? 54, 108. Right. Now we enter, well, how should I put it correctly, the scale factor. The Pyramid of Cheops is 146 meters, right? Why the Pyramid of Cheops, among other things, has such a gigantic height? Because when it was built, there were two tasks. The first task was to build a pyramid, a complex of cosmic communications, similar to the one that perished in Atlantis. So if you and I, for example, take the planet Earth, here is Greenland, there was a pyramid of Meru, this is roughly Africa. But I'm roughly speaking, okay. Here is where Atlantis was located, here in this place, here in a straight line, and if it is 90 degrees. Then here we draw a straight line here. Here is Kailas, and 90 degrees from here Kailas goes straight through the pyramids of Yaza, and straight to the pyramid of the Atlantans. That is, at first, why did 90 do it? Because the pyramid, this Kailas reflector, is the hypothalamus, the pituitary system of the Earth. The main cosmic stream from Shambhala comes here. It is transformed and distributed by the Earth. So we're coming back here. We need to write down all these data with you. In addition, we need to somehow record information with you that the time has changed with you.
Каким-то образом записать информацию о том, что у нас с вами изменилось время.
Even a year ago, it was 360 days, now it's 365, right? Moreover, when the asteroid hit the Earth, it has something, the Earth has a deviation. So before the recession angle was only 9 degrees, and now it's 24.5. It's constantly changing, it's unstable, and so on. That is, the declination of the angle, and if we follow with you, now I just won't focus on it yet. But in the ancient Egyptian cataclysmic zodiac, it is accurately shown that there was a jump in time, a sharp change in global time. So, in order to record this date, what date? After the fall of the asteroid 13,675 years ago, the angle and now the axis of rotation was in a chaotic state. The Earth was tumbling and chattering. That is, look, imagine, here we take a cube with you, fill it with glycerin, put a ball inside, glycerin inside the ball, and there is a core. And so we took you and spun this ball. Here it rotates like the Earth. The core is inside and they are rotating. Then I take it like that, lightly hit the surface, and it starts to shift, and it starts to twist. You understand, right? Like a spinning top. And the core, it starts to follow a little bit. In other words, we observe chaotic fluctuations of the magnetic axis, and so on, and so on. In other words, it all essentially leads the system into chaos. The celestial clock in chaos took exactly 1080 years for the system to more or less stabilize.
1080 лет для того, чтобы система более или менее стабилизировалась.
And when it stabilized, they decided to write down the date from which the precession time should be counted. And from here we count the heights of pyramids, complexes, but this is not the main thing.
Высоты пирамид, комплексов, но не это главное.
The main thing is that the moment when the Stargate opens depends on it.
Когда открываются звездные ворота.
When?
Когда?
At what point will you enter the pyramid and it will work, or you will but therefore half your life, it will not work. And they write it all down and put up. So, in order for them to arrange everything in Giza in this way with respect to the Milky Way, to the three stars of the asteroid belt, which clearly shows the date. Now we can count it. That is why the Giza complex is called a sacred place of modern times. But the whole problem is that energetically this place is dead, absolutely dead. It's nothing. Therefore, in order for the pyramid to somehow work, they make a pyramid of huge size, so that, at least through the mass, they influence the spatial temporal membranes and so on. And at the top of the pyramid, they place an energy source. This is a physical object. This is an artifact that is still there. But in order for the pyramid to work, it must, as it were, land on the wave of the earth, these 54. So, accordingly, we increase the pyramid 146 meters. That is, we put everything in order. We add 3 zeros to the sacred number of 1,000 days of time. You see, we extract the root and get 232. 379, this is the exact value of the width of the base of the pyramid. Therefore, all these modern constructions are even zero. Nothing is true. And most importantly, gold is in the pyramid of Cheops. You will be looking for the golden ratio there for a long time. His there goes point blank. Because she is tuned in, but in general for other things. This is to the question of understanding what pyramids are and what they were built for. You and I, as they say, drown for this great knowledge. Because if we are his, it's already showing me how much time is left there.
12, 15.
Now. Right. Well, then let's take a little break for now, and then I will return to such things. I will tell you that you will not read anywhere. Because in addition to these nuances, in order for the pyramid to work, everything is very interesting there. Well, then, let's drink tea coffee now, and after that we will start a conversation on this topic.